Welcome to the Registry Insider. I'm Bill Seifarth, CEO and Executive Director for the National Registry of EMTs. And today we're fortunate to have with us once again, I think for his third time on the podcast, Donnie Woodyard, who is the author of The Future of EMS, The Future of Emergency Medical Services, Artificial Intelligence, Technology, and Innovation. So Donnie, thanks for joining me once again, as I said, for the third time on the podcast.
Hey, Bill, it's a joy to be here. Really do appreciate the opportunity. And boy, I'm excited to talk about really the future in AI and where things are going.
So speaking of which, obviously we did a podcast previously on the history of EMS, which we might come back and revisit again sometime with a future episode. But you recently authored and published a book really focusing on that. So let's just start. Where is the future of EMS as it relates to, in particular, AI, artificial intelligence? Where's that going? What's it looking like for us in this EMS profession?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think, for all of us and really every aspect of our life over the past 18 to 24 months, we have really seen the concept of AI intersect in new ways in what we're doing. Now, let me be clear, AI is not new. I mean, we've been using AI in science for decades. But what's happened really over the past 18 to 24 months is it's become more accessible. We've had more computing power, and we've been able to integrate it really seamlessly into almost every aspect of what we do every day, from recording this podcast to how I get notifications on my phone now. And in EMS, AI is slowly being integrated into a few areas, but in many ways we are lagging behind. And it's the areas that we're lagging behind that I think we have real opportunity, not really opportunity, but we have a responsibility to ethically, responsibly understand it, embrace it, and implement it.
So where you mentioned we're lagging a little bit, which we'll get to that question in a minute, but where is AI currently utilized in EMS?
Yeah. So, for instance, there's some EMS services in the nation that's using AI in dispatch right now. And AI is really analyzing historic data and current data in real time that's providing enhanced dispatch decisions for positioning of ambulances and, how we actually even dispatch the ambulances, how the call takers take the information and process it. Life EMS up in Michigan pioneered this, and it's made a real dramatic impact on how they are actually operating their dispatch center. Another area that AI is just beginning to infiltrate into, and it's just on the surface for EMS, but is patient care documentation. Things like quality assurance is another area, and data analytics, just broad data analytics. But in all these areas, I'd say we are falling behind, but these are the areas that AI is beginning to just scratch the surface on, whereas in other industries, man, they've went full throttle in these areas.
Fascinating. So where is some of the potential that we could be using this? I know one piece that I've heard you talk about are the autonomous vehicles.
Yep. And
their safety implications there.
Yeah, absolutely. So autonomous vehicles. So that's really huge. So I'm amazed as I travel around. If you go back a year ago and I asked people at conferences, hey, how many of you have heard of an autonomous vehicle? Maybe a handful of hands would go up. Most people thought it was science fiction. And today that's, it's changing dramatically. Autonomous vehicles are a reality in cities across the United States. And companies like Waymo, for instance, they've taken these autonomous vehicles out of the lab into everyday operations, and they're competing head-to-head with rideshare like Uber and Lyft. In Houston, for instance, they're using autonomous vehicles to deliver pharmacy from pharmaceuticals from CVS to people's homes and other delivery services. But the reality is autonomous vehicles are not science fiction. They are fact today. And as in EMS industry, we are going to be forced to understand the technology and figure out how to actually integrate this. Let me give an example, Bill. 2009 is when Uber came out and they kind of rocked the world, and they say, we've got this new rideshare app thing. And and you can, use the internet to meet up someone in a car and go somewhere. And, it was against like everything we had ever been taught as a kid. Like, don't meet people on the internet, don't get in cars with strangers. And it kind of rocked the world. The taxi cab industry at the time saw this technology and they had a decision to make. And I mean, Bill, you probably remember, what did the taxi cab industry do?
They were significantly disrupted.
They were disrupted and they came out against it, and they shouted from the rooftop, this is not safe. It's not appropriate. It's wrong. It's going to take jobs. And the list goes on. So they tried to fight against the technology and use regulation and barriers to go against it. And well, today, sure, there are still a few places with taxis, but for every dollar of public of money that's spent into transportation through ride app or taxi, ride apps get $2 for every $1 the taxi cab industry had. And just a decade ago, they had 100% of the industry in taxis. And so I think in EMS, we're at that same junction point where the taxi industry was in 2009. The technology is there. We see it. It's autonomous vehicles. The question is, how are we as leaders going to integrate that into EMS? What does it mean? Are we going to have ambulances that are driverless where you have one EMT or one paramedic in the back? And Bill, I'm going to tell you, the answer is yes. Those concept ambulances are being built today. They're being tested right now in Europe. And the platforms are operational here right now in the US. Safety. People talk about safety all the time, and people are like, I'm not going to get into a vehicle driven by a computer. But Bill, the data, you can't argue with the data. The reality is that for every mile driven by an autonomous vehicle, it is significantly safer than a human driving it. And when we talk about an ambulance, it's off the chart. Yeah.
While we're talking about the safety of autonomous vehicles, I will tell you, Donnie, personal experience. Last week I was on the West Coast, and I actually drove several times in that car. I will tell you, it's a bit intimidating at first, but then realizing all the sensors that are on the car and how well it was able to navigate busy streets, it's quite impressive. So that technology is not in the future; it's here. And what timelines are you anticipating? Obviously, you said EMS is lagging. So given our hesitant nature to perhaps adopt the technology, what's the timeline you're looking at for EMS to adopt autonomous vehicles?
Boy, the AI revolution of how it's really changed our life, it's really going much faster than I think any of us would have predicted, even 2 years ago or 4 years ago when we saw this coming on the horizon. Right now, if I had to guess, I think that we'll probably have in the United States initial autonomous ambulances in some form in the next 36 months. And I think that the very first industry is going to come into, we might call it more on ambulette or non-acute patient transport side, but it's going to be patient transport in an autonomous vehicle. And it might be things like, home to doctor's office or to dialysis or dialysis back to home. It might be scheduled transfers. It might be interfacility stuff. And I think that'll be the beginning. But the jump from that to an advanced, critical care platform, that's a very small jump. The moment that you have an autonomous vehicle that a patient either in a wheelchair or stretcher or in in another configuration that we haven't thought of yet, I think that's going to happen very, very quickly. And in fact, there's already investors looking at that market space. And that's really the point I want to highlight for our EMS leaders. Like the taxi cab industry, they chose to fight the technology. In 2009, they could have said, wow, let's integrate that and change the way you hail a taxi. And instead, they chose to fight it. In EMS, we are looking at the technology. So either we adopt it as an industry, or what my prediction is that I hope doesn't come true, is if we resist it, someone else is going to come up with a model that is safer, It's going to be more efficient, more cost effective, and they're going to come in and they're going to take away aspects of what we are doing in EMS today. And here's the other reality. Many of those scheduled transfers, the interfacility transfers, the low acuity transfers, we know that that's a lot of the bread and butter finance for our system. And if all of a sudden a new industry comes in that takes that away, it's going to create new problems for EMS from a financial viability standpoint.
And sustainability as a profession. So, that's quite insightful. So within the profession, what are some of the barriers or other barriers that we're facing for us, whether it just be simple resistance to change, whether it be perhaps ignorance of the technology? What are some of those barriers, or what are those things that are holding us back?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of barriers out there, and some of these are barriers that are not just about barriers to like AI and technology, but it's barriers that we face. And at the first category is going to be bias, and so we have this cognitive bias. And I know some people have like a reaction when I say the word bias, but what I'm really talking about is the things that are currently, that we think about, the way we think through things. And psychologists have broken these down into all these categories of different biases. But let me give you an example. I recently did a post on social media about autonomous ambulances in the future. And, someone else replied to my post, and they put a picture of a Waymo car and in a traffic cone. And it was a story that the news media picked up a year or so ago of like Waymo got confused by a traffic cone. Okay, sure. That's one story out there. Or, an autonomous vehicle crashed and was involved in a crash. Yeah, it happens. But the reality is that's a type of a bias where we take something that is recent in a news article and available, and we over apply that to the whole situation. How many times do we have an ambulance crash? We know that the concept of driving an ambulance, responding to a call, is one of the most deadly aspects of our job today. And so we have technology that has proven to be safer. So that's a bias. And there's all different types of bias that are out there that's preventing us. And within that same category, there's this fear of, wow, if we bring in autonomous vehicles or if we bring in AI to help like with documentation, then somehow it's going to take my job. Well, what we see throughout history is that our workforce is very resilient. It morphs and it changes. Years ago, we had computers, meaning people who were computing algorithms, and NASA had rooms full of computers, people. And sure, then a modern computer came and it changed. It doesn't mean that the workforce shrunk. It means that the workforce shifted. So in EMS, I think that, the workforce will shift. I don't think it's going to shrink, but it's going to shift. But that's another type of a cognitive bias that's holding us back. The other aspect is not necessarily on the autonomous vehicles, but when we talk about AI for things like documentation, our NREMT system is very powerful. It's very important. It gives us data that, your organization uses and we use at a national level to make decisions. That data, it's very important. However, the way that we enter that data is currently outdated. The fact that we need to be doing drop downs and we need to be typing a report, that's ridiculous. We have solutions for that. Our partners inside the hospitals, inside our doctors' offices, they've embraced AI technology to help them do charting and notes and to make sure that, you don't have incongruities between what you document and billing. That's already been solved, but EMS has been slow to adopt that. And one of those barriers is we have a closed system that we've created over years with a lot of barriers to entry. If you look at healthcare, and some of the healthcare documentation companies, they have an open API approach. They have an open structure. We don't have that in EMS largely, and that's a barrier. So we have technology barriers, we have policy barriers, and we have cognitive bias barriers. And then, sure, there's a financial aspect of it as well. And we have to recognize that. However, the cost of implementing these systems are coming down, and we have to invest in the technology that is going to make us more efficient and sustainable in the future.
How do we do that? How do we overcome the technical barriers, the cognitive bias barriers, the cost barriers? What's the pathway for that future? How do we do that?
I think back to one of our past podcasts about the history of EMS, and I think back to some of those incredible people, from Rocco Mirando at the National Registry, through people like Peter Seifarth and Norm McSwain and Nancy Caroline and so many others that we could list. When I analyze what they did, because they had an insurmountable problem. They had this concept that was bigger than what they were, and that's kind of where we're at today. We're like, man, this is going to cost too much. It's insurmountable. How do we do it? Well, they came together and they had a bold, unified vision. They coalesced around that. And so, there's this African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that they embraced that. And they said, no, we're going to come together. We're going to have a unified vision. And and I'm not going to do this as 50 different individuals doing 50 different things. We're going to come together and have a unified vision. I think that's important. So we coalesce around a unified vision. Our colleagues in healthcare, physicians and nurses and PT and OT across the board, they have written position papers and guidance documents on the ethical, responsible use of AI and technology. As an industry, we don't have that yet. I think we have to do that. We need to come together and say, we're going to have a EMS clinician first approach. Things like AI and technology are going to be brought in to help make our clinicians better clinicians. And this is the roadmap of doing that. And then the other thing is, in that same vein, it's collaboration. We have to be able to collaborate and have open collaboration. And through that open communication collaboration is where we go far as an industry. So I think what I would say is really within the next few months, within the next year, we should have multi-organizational position papers on how the ethical, responsible use of AI is brought into our industry. We need to have workforce and task forces right now trying to figure out what type of regulation do we need at the state level to allow for autonomous vehicles. How we can't ignore it. How are we going to bring them in? Do we change our staffing so that we don't have to have, a driver and 2 EMTs or 2 paramedics or, 2 paramedics that are drivers? What do we have to change with that? And then we need to make sure that we look at our billing regulations because, we have to make sure that we don't let billing regulations prohibit us from embracing technology. And so we have to work together on those fronts, and we're already behind.
So that's the call to action then, from I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
And I think we as a profession need to do this and take it on. So hopefully this podcast will start to put the wheels in motion as far as this needed call to action to start developing the guardrails, the bumpers, the kind of playing field for AI as it is right now and how we can embrace it and other technology going forward. So Donnie, I mentioned at the outset of this, you are an author of several books, but the one obviously today we're talking about is The Future of EMS, Artificial Intelligence, Technology, and Innovation. Where can people go to either find out more about that on your website and or order a copy of the book for their reading pleasure?
Yeah, Bill, thanks. Well, I have a copy right here. So that's what it looks like. It's available globally on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And so you can search it up there. You can search up by my name or the title, The Future of Emergency Medical Services, and it'll come up. And I also have a companion website, and this is something I learned from the first book that I put out. And that companion website is ems-ai.com. And on this site, sure, you can read about the book, but I also have reference materials. And so I really believe in this transparency of having materials available. So for instance, if you want to know how, the American Nursing Association or the College of, Family Practice, physicians, or, how they're approaching AI, all of those documents are linked to on the website. You can read their position papers. You can study their processes. If you want to learn about the history of AI, I've got all of that on there as well. So it's all available. It's all online, and I encourage people to check it out.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me. And as always, stay safe.
Thanks, Bill.
See ya. Thanks,
Bye.
Donnie. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you wouldn't mind, please click the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notifications so you can get notifications of upcoming episodes. Also, for the latest and greatest happenings of the National Registry, feel free to go to nremt.org. Thank you very much. And again, stay safe.